Initiatory techniques and rituals have been an essential part of human cultures for tens of thousands of years. In tribal and aboriginal societies, initiations serve a number of different purposes. On one level, rites of passage create a threshold between childhood and adulthood, marking a major life boundary. They're also a time when the elders pass on oral traditions and knowledge to the young. But most important, the traditional process of initiation involves a disciplined training in extrasensory perception and non-ordinary states of consciousness, learning to communicate with the spirit worlds that lie beyond the limits of our physical senses. So what I'd like to do is just take one more moment in this space to just kind of have a silent meditative moment to kind of let go of anything we're holding on to in our minds or our hearts. And then we'll actually stroll over to the side space where Isabella will open us up and call in the 4 directions. So first a moment. I just want to lay some ground rules for the discussion so we're all on the same page. Obviously this is a theme that can invoke very lengthy stories. And so what we're going to ask is during the discussion session, unless you're one of the special guests, which would be Amy, Daniel, and Isabella, to just try to keep your comments to about 2 minutes at a time. And you know, if enough people have spoken, you can definitely jump back in. But we want to keep it balanced, so we want as many different perspectives to come out as possible this evening. So we're going for kind of diversity of stories, experiences, and talking points. And so what we've done to kind of moderate the discussion is we have 2 different talking sticks that Daniel is holding, prepared by an artist, a local artist who would like to, for now, remain anonymous. But basically the idea is not just 1 talking stick, but 2, because we like to have dialogue and we encourage debate and kind of back and forth of ideas. But also just to respect that when one person's talking, we should wait until, you know, so to speak, they're done or it gets passed along. And also, if you are wanting to speak, the idea is that Daniel speaks and I'm holding the other talking stick, I'm next. But when he's done speaking, if somebody wants to gesture to him, ask for this talking stick, or just come grab it from him, you can do that. That way we can kind of pass it around, share it, and always have somebody kind of waiting in the wings to talk or whatever, so there's kind of less awkward transition time as well. So those are just basically the ground rules. I expect that everyone will be really respectful towards each other's perspectives and ideas as well. But do know that as a moderator, I might cut you off or ask somebody else to chime in who hasn't spoken yet. And that it's all in the spirit of really as many people being able to share as possible in a fairly short amount of time, because we're not going to sit and talk all night. We're going to do some other stuff too. Sound good? Okay. Yeah.
And does anyone have an objection to being filmed?
Oh yes, if you have an objection to being filmed,
just let me know.
Yeah, definitely.
What's going to happen to the film?
It's going to end up on YouTube, basically, and the Burning Man site and wherever, you know.
All over the planet.
Cool. And so please, if you're not comfortable with that, do not hesitate to let us know. I expect that at least 3 or 4 people probably aren't comfortable with that. But I would like you to feel comfortable sharing. So all you can do is, if you got the talking stick, it's your turn to go, just ask him to pause it before you begin. And we can do that. Yep. Cool. All right, so at this point, I'm really excited to introduce Daniel. He's one of those guys that, you know, just so many friends were telling me, like, hey, you know Daniel Breznoff? And I was like, no, I haven't met this guy yet. So this event really gave us the impetus to reach out to one another and to actually kind of start this discussion on a more kind of dialogue basis, and to start really thinking about how this topic connects to our community and some of the things we've experienced. So I won't say too much about Daniel. I'll let him speak for himself in terms of his background, but just really excited to have him here tonight and to have a packed house too. So give yourselves a round of applause and give Daniel a round of applause.
Hi everybody. Probably will stand because I have a lot of energy and it just feels better if that's okay. So I'm really glad that we're kind of hanging out in this in-between space, I feel like. There's this edge between cerebral and like emotional, social, spiritual or ceremonial, right? I even feel like there's a little edge between kind of like the circle and just kind of like public. Like it's like we're here, like in public, but sort of like we're like in this little circle. So it's just an interesting edge. I'm a member of a church called the Church of Santo Daime, and in the Church of Santo Daime, the cross that is used, it is a Christian syncretic church, meaning it blends Christianity with other traditions. But the cross that's used, Santo Crucero, has two horizontal bars, one at the heart and one at the third eye. So the idea is both that this is the second coming of Christ consciousness through the medicine Daime, which most people know as ayahuasca, and also that your third eye is important. Your mind is important. We don't have to disregard it. It needs to be aligned, is the idea in the teaching. So that doesn't have so much to do with rites of passage, but I've just been thinking it based on what has been spoken tonight. I come from a strictly intellectual family. Lived in a community that was mostly Jewish. I was not bar mitzvah. Other people were bar mitzvah, but I looked at these people, and they didn't really look like they knew all that much, like anything special. They just kind of seemed like they were going through the motions, right? Now, bar mitzvah is a rite of passage. So this thing is rite of passage, right? There's two parts. There's rite and passage, right? So the rite, there's many kinds of rites and rituals. It's the same ritual, rite, same thing. It doesn't necessarily have to do with a passage all the time. So before you eat, you might say some prayers over the food. It's not a rite of passage, but it's a rite, right? But a bar mitzvah, definitely a rite of passage, right? Supposedly at age 13, you're a man. So, in the 1970s and 80s in the suburbs of New York at 13, you're not a man. Clearly you're not a man. The next day, you go back to middle school. What kind of rite of passage is that? Middle school, now there's a rite of passage. Okay? Because it has some emotional impact. Actually, once you're past it, you maybe are going to be treated a little bit differently. Now you're on the other side of puberty. If you're lucky by the time you're through middle school. But if you're unlucky, I'll just disclose, I was kind of a late bloomer. You had to get to high school and you still look like one of these little kids. And then there's these guys in your grade like this, right? So I guess maybe middle school is not really completely a rite of passage because you can come through it and you're not equal with all the other people who came through it. That's what a rite of passage is supposed to do. This separation, transition, reintegration, right? For a boy, you go away from your mama. No more mama. Then you're going to go through some kind of test, something. Some challenge to say that you're ready. The thing is, the idea is, we know you're going to pass the test. It's going to be hard, it's going to be scary, but you're going to pass it. We don't want to set up tests that like half the kids fail. It's going to really mess with the morale of the people, right? And let me just stop for a minute at that moment because I just said the morale of the people. I'm so glad this word community got mentioned by Tony, talking about how when we met, right? This is a really important part of rite of passage that you don't always hear about. This idea, by the way, rite of passage, it's a 19th century French guy named Van Gennep, or Gennep, I don't know how you say it in French, but who noticed, hey, everybody all over the world does these things. Birth ceremonies, puberty ceremonies, marriage ceremonies, initiation to the warrior group ceremonies, these passages, and they all have these things in common, these three things. This separation, this transition, and this integration. What's kind of implicit in this is community. And this is really, really important because if a rite of passage doesn't have a community to say, yes, we witnessed, now you're different, and we're going to treat you different. We accept and acknowledge you have a different role in the community, you're in a different stage of your development because we saw you went through the thing, whatever that was. If you don't have that, it doesn't really mean, my grandma would say, it means buckus. It doesn't mean anything, okay? It's just a game. It's just it's like farce almost, right? This is a big challenge for us in our Western culture because we have rites of passage and Western society has rites of passage. It's just that nobody's invested in them. Nobody's really emotionally invested in them. We separate, right? We separate the spiritual from the material, from the economic, from the social. It's all separate. Everything's separation in our society. everything is separation, right? That's kind of the problem, right? So this reintegration, part of it is the community's got to actually invest in these rites of passage. They have to be meaningful. I think I'm almost done with my rant. I've been thinking about, you know, what's a rite of passage? What constitutes a rite of passage? Because, you know, people will say, well, we don't really have a rite of passage, but, you know, you get your driver's license, or, you know, you're 21 and you go out and get drunk, or, you know, you get married for the 3rd time. That's a California rite of passage. And, you know, but they're not really rites of passage. So I'm kind of thinking, what are these different things that are kind of serving the purpose, right? So I could think of these 3 kind of quasi-rites of passage. First of all, there's these like bureaucratic ones. Those are probably the most deadly, right? Because when the bureaucracy's taking over your spiritual life, so, you know, your driver's license, right? Or like go try to open a business. It's like a rite of passage. It shouldn't be, probably, but like, you know, you see, you know, you go through these things that are like these trials, and then it changes your role in the community. And some of them seem to you as the initiate to be, what is the purpose of this? They're very, very mysterious. But maybe later, when you get highly initiated into the bureaucracy, right? Then you go, oh, now I understand why they do it that way. It's totally crazy and stupid, but now it makes sense from the bureaucratic point of view. Well, that's just like what a rite of passage would be like in a tribe, right? It's mysterious at first, and then later you go, oh, now I get it, now that I've been an adult for a while. So you can see how our bureaucracy has really taken on this role in kind of a scary way. So that's kind of one of the quasi-rites of passage. Then there are these natural rites of passage, right? Nature just kind of gives them to you, right? So, you know, if you're a mama, you didn't have to have like a priest there and say the magic words and you know, go through. It just kind of happens. I mean, it's like, you know, your family's going to start to treat you differently. You're pregnant. It's like, oh, you know, they're going to treat you differently and do things for you and with you that they didn't do before. And then, you know, maybe your mom now maybe shares some parts of her experience with you that she didn't before. And then you go through, you know, this trial, this incredible challenge, and come out the other side. And you're changed. You have a different role. But it's not necessarily ritualized. I mean, if you go in the hospital, it's not really ritualized, and yet there's this passage that takes place, and people say, "Well, that's like a rite of passage. Now you're a mom," but it's quasi, right? Unless you throw in all the real ritual, then it is. And then there are these informal ones, and this is probably how most of us got here, right? I mean, we're looking for community. I think is part of it, and that's part of what a rite of passage builds. So I didn't even know you were there. The rite of passage isn't just for the individual, right? I mean, that's maintaining all the ways of the community and the connection of the community that people have all gone through it or witnessed it. So we're missing that, and we're seeking it. And we're also seeking, like Tony was saying. Wasn't Tony saying that, right? Probably. You were speaking about that, about your youth, and wanting, oh no, you were reading, it was Daniel Pinchbeck's youth. That's who it was, right. Our friend Daniel Pinchbeck, talking about his youth, you know, seeking this initiatory process. And so I think what a lot of us do is, right, we go and we drink too much, or we smoke, or we eat psychedelics, maybe as, I think probably, I'm going to turn 40 this year, probably for people who are older than I am, it was a much harder struggle to find, what do I do, how do I do this? And I think for people maybe that are younger than I am, hopefully it's getting a little bit easier, because I think there's more information out there about like how to go in the desert with your, whatever your medicine, and say the prayers and have the intention. It was like, we were crazy, like we're definitely protected because we just had no like knowledge, you know, and that's because there was no rites of passage. Nobody, like the rite of passage was like go to a Dead show. Like, you know, I mean, you know, maybe that could work with the right people, but, you know, the fourth thing that's available is a real rite of passage. That's instead of those 3 quasi rites of passage. And so people are starting to do this, right? Burning Man, to me, is I almost want to say like the miracle of Burning Man is that it's a big accident. It's like actually nobody, the way it is now, like nobody actually sat down back in like 1985 and said, this is what we're going to do. It just kind of evolved. It just kind of happened. I mean, there's definitely planning that's gone into making it like it is. But it became this rite of passage, really, for people. This group rite of passage, sort of by accident. Because of the collective needs, I think, of these Gen Xers and whoever. Are you raising your hand?
Yeah, I was actually at the first Burning Man in San Francisco on Baker Beach.
All right, I'm done talking. Talk to him now. I'm done.
Well, I'm actually curious to see, like, how many people, show of hands, are like fairly familiar with Burning Man. Like, you know kind of what it's about. All right. Keep your hands up if you've been to Burning Man. Okay, interesting mix. Cool. So
And if you're going to Burning Man,
who's going this year?
who has tickets?
Who's got tickets? All right.
That's a question, isn't it? That's a question. Does that count?
Yes.
So I think probably from everything I've said, I mean, I don't have like a real conclusion other than like, you know, we need to build these and continue building them. And I think with some, maybe this is one of the last thing I want to add is just with some caution and discernment. My mouth is very dry, excuse me. With some discernment, because it's easy, I think, to just kind of imitate what we've seen and go through the motions. And if these rituals are going to have any power, you know, transformative power, we kind of have to take care of it. We have to contain it. We have to integrate it. It takes a sort of seriousness of intention and alertness. So I've just put that out there as we go on to our study and our experimentation. You know, and you know, quadruply so what I just said, if you're using any kind of thing that's going to change the molecular chemistry, okay, then double 10 times caution, right, and discernment and education beforehand. So that's probably a pretty good jumping off point for discussion, right? I hope. Okay. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Cool. So I wonder, maybe a good way to open up discussion would be with a question. Like, who would like to maybe pose a question for Daniel, and then we could kind of go off of that. Yes, in the stairs. That is Isa. Hi.
What has been your personal rite of passage? What has been your experience in your own that you can describe in one situation?
You know, I've been doing a lot of ceremony in the last 10 years. In terms of rites of passages, probably some of my most important ones were really accidental, informal, not held by the community, but I, you know, just had to hold them because of what I kind of stumbled into. But the one I guess I want to share that's the most memorable is when my wife was pregnant. We have a 2-year-old, and maybe she was in her 8th month or something like that, and you know, our community had a baby shower for her at our house, and it was mixed gender, like everyone was invited and I was there. But then at some point, the women stayed inside, and the men went out in the backyard. And there were only a few of us, like 6 of us, and probably some people know Tony Moss, right? And Tony Moss facilitated this and Sonny too, and they were initiating me into fatherhood, which is probably a little premature since he wasn't here yet. The next day I was like, oh, now I'm a father. Oh wait, no, not really. You know, my friends who were fathers were like, no, you're not. But they did this initiation, which involved tequila and snake, and it was good, and it helped. It really helped a lot because these 2 guys, Tony and Sonny, are in our community something of leaders and role models and teachers. You know, and to have them saying to me in this very unique space, I mean, you're doing, one of the things about a rite of passage or any ceremony is you're doing something a little different. It's not a normal thing that you're doing with, you know, with a snake, and they were like writing on me with black magic marker, which because after the tequila I was like, is that a knife? What are you doing? You know, I thought they were like carved their names in my arm or something, but you know, to have them say to me in this kind of altered state, like, hey, you are now Papa in our community, like it's a new role, and for them to honor that, and with, you know, the other guys who were there, and they're just more like my brothers, my fellows, whatever, was just, was helpful. It was helpful to me in being prepared and knowing my place. Yeah.
That's a great discussion point if others want to share rites of passage they've experienced. And again, try to keep it to like 2 minutes or less so we can hear a bunch of them.
First Burning Man.
Yeah. Pass the talking stick.
Hey, I'm Buck.
Anybody down for the next one?
Since Daniel already touched on parenthood, my 2 beautiful children are parents. And my older daughter is in the
Hey, how many folks had somewhat of a traumatic or near-death experience around the age of 13. Anyone else?
You got a talking stick over here. I don't know.
Interesting, quite a few. All right, so you're next on deck. Just real quick, my story was I was in a car accident when I was 13 that nearly killed me. Miraculous synchronicities led to like one of the best plastic surgeons being in the hospital when they wheeled me in. All this amazing stuff happened, but like right after the accident though, my mom and I are both convinced we saw like a very large angelic presence there with us, and then it left or whatever, and apparently there was no one there with us. So I don't know, for me that experience really invigorated like some kind of a connection to spirit that I don't think I would have really felt and known without that traumatic near-death experience. So I feel like that's one of the big reasons I've stayed on some sort of spiritual path my whole life, because of that experience. And I just wonder if it's kind of archetypally, like on a cosmic level, a lot of people have those kinds of experiences at that age, whether or not society encourages them to or they seek it out. I wonder if it just kind of happens. But that's an experience that I would consider a rite of passage, in that I realized kind of some of the depth and gravity of life and death, and felt a connection to spirit. Do you want to go next since you have the talking stick?
Yeah, I was going to talk about some of the rites of passage.
My name is Mike, and I just wanted to say that I think it's really crazy that this is my friend Eddie, that Burning Man this year is going to be rites of passage, focused on that, and you know, we're young in our life, and we just really got turned on to this kind of thing, and it's like you said, synchronicities, you know, like everything's falling into place. I'm hearing a lot of things and going where I'm at in life, and it's crazy that this year is the year that's going to do that, you know. I didn't think that was by coincidence at all, you know, like, and I'm being turned on to it, and I just think it's really cool that, you know, and especially today, even this discussion, you know, just to turn me on, a little primer, this and that, or whatever, you know, and I'm not saying that I've had major rites of passage, but it's cool that maybe I get to choose mine this time, you know, with the Burning Man, you know, I get to choose to go to this trial by fire, or whatever it is, you know, that I need to do.
Thanks.
Can I?
Oh yeah, you can jump in anytime.
Because otherwise I feel like we may go somewhere else and everyone will be like, what's he talking about? You know, I think one of the things with, you talked about your experience as kind of reawakening you, or awakening you to spiritual power, to the visible world, right? Yeah. And, you know, in our society, a rite of passage may serve that as a very necessary tool to get back to spirit. And, you know, in a traditional society, that's just the day, that's just the everyday. What might change with the rite of passage is your relationship to that power. And so, you know, I think in many of the indigenous practices, the spiritual practices, maybe not of all of the elders, but at least of a select group of elders, could be men, could be women, could be both, depends on the time and place. Part of their spiritual practice is actually, you know, giving a spiritual power, increasing pranic energy in your body, which is going to give you understanding in your brain, you know, health, charisma in your tribe, healing powers, you know, understand all kinds of prediction powers, not necessarily because you the crystal ball, but just from looking around and evaluating the situation with a lot of prana in your brain, right? Well, a little kid with too much prana, I don't know, you know, that's maybe not good. We need to, you know, so we're not going to teach you the techniques to get the prana in your body until we first know that you have the maturity to handle that. And so that's going to be part of the rite of passage of adolescence in many traditions, not in all. And but in our society, we're so lost from all this stuff that 1 or 2 rite of passages might not be enough. You may need 7, 8, 9, 10 to like put back all the pieces together, because you're doing the work, not just for you, but all the generations before you who forgot. That's a lot of work to do.
All right, it's your turn now.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this Burning Man in San Francisco. What is this place? Burning Man?
Outside of Nevada.
That's in Nevada. Well, can somebody fill me in on what that is?
That's a long conversation.
Yeah, it's a counterculture festival that deals with self-reliance. Radical self-reliance is their motto. So you have to go out into the desert and live for basically a week out in the middle of nowhere and bring everything you need to survive. And they built a city from nothing. 50,000 people last year. Yeah.
Okay, like a phoenix or something, like coming up from the ashes or something?
Yeah, sort of like that.
His website.
Yeah.
Okay. But I was going back to what you said, like getting beat up in Brooklyn and you had to, you know, go through a lot of pain and stuff like that. That was your rite of passage?
Not necessarily that. I'm talking about going from one level of knowing how to deal with violence and taking it to the next level. And not, you know, I mean, being bullied or whatever like that, sometimes that might lead to violence, but if you know how to talk your way out of it, it might not lead to violence. So, you know, I mean, there's different ways of handling it, and that's what I was saying, is that as I got more mature, it didn't turn into, you know, actual hand-to-hand combat. You know, at a certain point, people knew that I knew how to take care of myself, and they wouldn't even bother me anymore.
Oh, because I don't know if I've gone through. People say I'm a non-fighter, so do I have to bully somebody? You know, beat the next guy up to, you know, as a rite of passage, you know, to prove I'm a man.
No, you came out here to Long Beach. Yeah. From the East Coast.
Yeah, I'm just a question.
No, it doesn't have to be about violence. You're traveling. You're actually traveling from the East Coast.
No, what I'm saying is bullying the next person a rite of passage. That's what I'm trying to.
I think in a lot of cultures it is, but I don't think it needs to be, right? I mean, if that's what it means to a certain person to become a man, you know, I think that we could come up with like way better ways to establish becoming a man. And obviously, rites of passage don't need to be so based on gender and like, you know, one-upping other people either.
No man, no boy can become a man by bullying. He remains a boy.
I think if there's, you know, if there's in rites of passage, if there's a place for something that might look like bullying, but actually isn't, it would be for the boy to experience, you know, physical pain and fear and that kind of challenge, and be able to overcome it and show that they can fight back. I mean, if we're talking about a traditional society, you know, that's going to be often part of what's expected of a man for the survival of the tribe. But it's not, you know, it's not a personal thing of aggression between this guy and this guy. It's to teach. And I think that's part of also why ritualization is so important, because if you don't do that, then maybe it escapes and becomes bullying on the street, which actually is dangerous and not helpful to the community. But if you contain it in ritual, you can move some of those same energies and teach some of the same lessons, but in a safe way.
It's interesting that I'm sorry, you were gonna, yeah, okay. I know, it's just interesting because that whole idea of we have no parameters here. So what's coming to me right now is like, yeah, the kids in the street, the boys in the street are fighting because they have no rites of passage, because they have nobody with a parameter that says, you're 13, now's your time, here's a safe environment for you to, you know, we look at it as bullying or fighting or being bullied, but this is it, here's your parameter. And here, we don't have that, so people are in the streets, kids are in the streets, they're bullying, they're fighting, trying to, because their DNA remembers there's some kind of rite of passage. And you're wondering why women aren't talking, because we got a rite of passage. We got our moon, we got babies, you know. Men, they don't have anything here. So it's interesting that, yes, men are talking more than women. But that's all I got to say. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Actually, it leads into, I'm a non-made, by the way. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's partly what I was going to touch on is I was actually yearning from a very young age to have some sort of rite of passage, and I never really got to experience it. My mom was just kind of in and out, absent as far as being a role model in my life. And so I found myself creating my own rites of passage, you know, because a lot of times we moved everywhere, so I was constantly moving. So I was kind of communing with nature all the time, wherever we went, because that was really the only constant friend that I had. So my rites of passage were wherever I was and however I could create my own ritual. And I didn't really realize what I was doing or how much it affected me until I think it was a lot of shutting down after I went through kind of like middle school and part of high school, like just kind of a lot of, you know, spiritual centers just kind of closing down or closing off, or having to create blockages to protect myself and not really knowing how to do that properly and not having anyone there to guide me. And I think what I was wanting to bring to the table is how important it is and how challenging it can be, especially in metropolitan areas, for us to have the space and how necessary it is for us to create that space, even as women, even though we get our moon, and even though we, can have children, and it's so important for us to be a part of that. And so my rites of passage actually didn't start coming in more formally until I was connected with some women here in Long Beach who started doing rites of passage for women and children, like young women who were coming into their moon. And I got to be a part of those ceremonies, and I started, doing more sweats and things like that. And once I started to come into doing more ritual like that, I felt finally like I was home, and I wish that I would have had something like that when I was growing up. And I just think it's so important for us to support our youth and create experiences like that for them. And it's so healing for us to participate in that. And especially, like I said, especially in cities where we're just like, we're inundated with how fast-paced things are going, and it seems like we don't have the space, or we don't create the space to have that sacred time and that sacred space here. So that's kind of what I was just wanting to bring to the table, is like, how important it is for us to participate in that, and how healing it is when you're finally able to be a participant in something with a community that is on the same page, instead of having to go at it yourself.
I totally agree. I think it would completely change, and I know there are programs. I did a video 12 years ago on teen fathers, and this place up in Monterey Park, that these guys actually have a place where boys can come and have a rites of passage and become men, and so there are places. I mean, Google rites of passage in your area, but if there isn't anything here, create it. That's the whole thing. It's like we could sit here and talk about our experiences, but what happens after the Evolver meetings? What's happening in the community? What is Evolver? That's what I believe Evolver is all about, is taking them with the knowledge you get here and getting a spark and going, the two of us, we could go create something and grab some kids out of the street and make like a cool thing. And we don't need money to do it. Everyone's like, I need money, I need a building. I turned my home into the Orange County Healing Center. You know what I mean? It's like wherever you are, create it.
Exactly, and just to put it out there, there are some great resources if you want to start a project in the community. We're launching an organization called Shift Long Beach, which will present Evolver Spores, but will also help facilitate other workshops and things that people want to do and gatherings. There's also the Catalyst space on 1st Street, which is available to be reserved, for donation basis within the community for different gatherings you might want to do. So that's Catalyst over on 1st Street. There are other spots too, but yeah, I think a lot of times our private spaces in our homes can be nice places to build more intentional community. For example, the house I'm living in, aptly called the Roswell House, we're starting to build more of an intentional community where we have, a few different folks starting to come in and build with us who don't necessarily live there. And it's been a really cool experiment so far. But I think there are a few houses like that in our network, and we could build more connectivity between them, have more sacred space and intentional gatherings and things like that, so we have like a strong sense of community and connection beyond just, oh yeah, I see these people at events that I go to. Well, where do we have the space and the time to really connect and to really find how I feel like a lot of, if not all of us, are going through a very similar process of initiation and kind of this time leading up to 2012, that we're having very similar experiences. So it's great to share that in this context, but even more intimate context, like gatherings with 5 or 6 people seem to really be where it's at too.
Right.
So you can really get in depth.
And following the moon, right? Having new moon ceremony, full moon ceremony.
Yes.
Just to clarify some things so we can go deeper in this conversation. I heard about 2 different types of passages of rites here. And what came to surface was that it was either based on, society or gender. My understanding of passages of rites comes from the ancient Egyptians understood that from the point of birth, every 7 years we cycle into a deeper state of understanding. This was regardless of your gender. And there were certain cosmic understandings as far as a ratio that you would have to understand what it is that you are growing into an understanding of. So that's 2 different things. They're separate there. I felt like what was being addressed though, more so about what are the lack of passages of rite. I don't think there's a lack of them as much as I see that there is a replacement of ones that are sacred. So when I see things like initiations of gang members and them having a circle and the person being beat up, and there is a use of blood in a circle, well, that's a ritual. It may not be sacred or focused, but it is still a human behavioral pattern that can be definitely seen by anthropologists as a human constant nowadays. So, at the end of the day, what we're talking about here are the passages of rites that we're forced into nowadays, and also the psychological passages of rites that happen when someone is having conscious enlightenment, like she was explaining within her own process of enlightenment. Like she said, you said you didn't feel you had rites of passages, but at the same time you did go through sweat lodge, you went through ceremonial with elders, so you did get a rites of passage. It just wasn't at the time that you thought would have been better, but from a more understanding of a conscious point, things happen where they do need to happen. So the ceremonies do exist for us. They come based on what you have prescribed for yourself to experience and what you are asking of the universe based on a clarity of whatever, whether you were lucky or blessed enough to have someone to reveal that kind of spiritual information, or whether you were just kept away from certain things like joining the army or whatever, being a Boy Scout, I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's very interesting the passage of rites that people go through, regardless of gender or age or understanding, as they're becoming exponentially aware of themselves, of their reality, of their experience when they learn what their triggers are and how to moderate them. So I think that that's a really interesting thing, because the oracles of Delphi, just for example, their passage of rite was that there would be a pit dug out, and they would choose a very beautiful young potential clairvoyant, and she would be put in the center of the pit that would have serpents in it. Upon her placement within the pit, they would place a seed within her hand that she had to hold on for 9 days. The pit was sealed. Now, her test was not to survive that. Her test was that when they opened the pit and she opened the hands, the seeds would be germinated. So, women do have rites of passages that are amazing, things that I still haven't seen Native American elders do, within their 4-day fasting out in the wilderness. So, there is a wide variety of history on rites of passages, and it's an incredibly interesting part of humanity, and I do believe this is part of a newer type of passage that we're learning to understand.
It's kind of interesting, this idea of how rites of passage has changed in Western culture, and I think kind of what you're talking about is that it seems like nowadays it's almost something that we have to force upon ourselves in this individualistic society. So like when I was 12, my father walked out on my family, and it was just my mom and I, because my brother was much older. And so I took that upon myself as a rite of passage. No one told me that I had to get a job, but I saw what was happening to my family, and so I kind of put myself through a rite of passage. But I think this problem of Western society of relying on these very individual rites of passage versus, the village raising the child and the village putting that person through a rite of passage, like in these parameters, like you were talking about, is that it can be self-destructive. So because I didn't have this guide through this rite of passage, which is something I took upon myself, I felt that by the time I was 13 that, I'm working, I'm an adult, I can treat myself like an adult, I can drink like an adult, and so I went on this very self-destructive path because my rite of passage wasn't guided by anyone. Like kind of how you're saying, like you're just kind of lost, wandering around on your own, trying to figure it out. So then by the time I was 14 or 15, going back to the near-death experience, I was in a drunk driving accident. I wasn't the driver, but I shouldn't have gotten in the vehicle, but I was drunk, and you know, that happens because you're not paying attention. And so I mean, I'm lucky that I'm here today, but I'm not from a city. I'm from a small town in Northern California, so I think it's not just this idea of a metropolitan area not having the space or the room to grow. I think it's just this idea of Western society not paying attention to what's going on with our youth today.
Yeah, I mean, I just think kind of unspoken here is that we're kind of still a counterculture. We have our own little thing going on, but yet we're economically tied to the matrix. You know, most of us are very much economically tied to the matrix, and probably a little bit culturally too, right? I mean, I like Radiohead. You know, it's like, and you can say, well, they're countercultural. Yeah, but you know what? They're on the computer. You're tied to the computer. You're tied to the freaking work. So the point is, with a rite of passage, right? You go through it. Your whole community now says, "Oh, I acknowledge." But I go to church at Santa Dame. They give me my star. Nobody cares at work. You understand? Right? Like maybe one of my friends is interested, kind of on the side, but I can go back to work. It's the same, right? You know, the police officer's not going to treat me any differently if I'm speeding, that's for sure, right? So you're the same out here, and that's, I think, it's part of why it's hard. It's why it's so like trying to piece it all together so hard, because we're connected, but yet we feel spiritually very separated. Like we want to do our own thing. We know what that is, I think, right? But most of us kind of have an idea what that is, but we're just still tied to this thing. The other thing, I just wanted to say this, I don't remember what brought it up to me, but I think one of the things that we're trying to experience and needing so much to experience in ritual space, and especially probably in rite of passage, is our power. It's who we are. It's like our full power as a human being. Like, you know, it's like if you have a Porsche and you only are allowed to drive in like your neighborhood, like you're gonna go crazy, right? You're gonna like one day you're just gonna like tear it up on the front lawn because it's a Porsche. You gotta drive this thing at least once, right? And then everyone's gonna be like, look what you did to the front lawn. So it's like the same thing. It's like, this is a Porsche. Our mind, our spirit, it's a Porsche. And we go in our society like we're all a bunch of tractors, right? Like pulling out of work and pull everything. You know, it's like there's a Porsche that can fly and go in the water. People want to do that. Ritual lets you do that. If you don't give the people that experience of their power, then they're gonna go out and they're gonna, that's what these young men want to do. These young men they're warriors and princes and medicine men, and they're being told, shut up and study math, and you know maybe you'll be lucky and get a job picking up garbage. Really, that's what I mean. So, and of course they're going to go out and act like warriors. It's much better than being like.
Yeah, we kind of think we're invincible, and I think that at some point, you know, we have to get to the point where we get knocked in the face hard enough to realize we're not, and maybe that's part of it. I know Amy wanted to chime in, and then you guys are right after her.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for me, initiation is not an issue so much of power as it is of balance. Like, it's something that teaches us how to be in balance with, like, our community or the spirit, depending on which way, you know, which way we're going.
Right. I mean, I think that's exactly to balance, but to balance in our full power. I mean, not to have to give up who we are.
Yeah, well, I don't know, you know, like, I mean, my own personal experience, I'll talk about it later in the other room, but it was a really giving up of who I was. And I really do think that man does have to give up who he is, insofar as, you know, he's turned the earth into his whore. Like, it's just this money machine. And you know, the earth is a virgin in Eden. And that's the big discrepancy we're dealing with. Like, that's the big global issue, is the earth being a whore to man. So,
I think that, and just taking the atmosphere as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, like, I really appreciate everyone sharing all the different perspectives, and it's interesting to hear the reflections about how we all view rites of passage. And I think just the last thing that I'm really wanting to kind of bring as food for thought, since it's closing everything out, is just, while we do have all these minor milestones that we go through and all these minor rites of passage that we can put ourselves through. And believe me, I can definitely relate to that. Like I said, from a young child, I just kind of had to find my own way with that. And yeah, there is a lot of spiritual depth to that and importance, and it doesn't, I'm not trying to diminish that in any way because they were powerful for me. But I think what I've looked for and what I yearn for and what I think is kind of missing in our society at this point, at least wherever I've looked, is the depth. The depth and the milestones that are huge milestones, the big rites of passage. Yeah, we can go through a million daily rites of passage, we can go through our own personal rites of passage. Ultimately, yes, we only have ourselves in the end, really. It's nice to have that community, it's nice to have the connection. But I think what I'm looking for, and definitely I would like to connect with other people that are looking for the same thing, is people who are experienced in and able to guide others through with their knowledge and wisdom gathered from studying rites of passage, from going through that themselves, from making that a focus in their lives, to create space for milestone rites of passage in people's lives. You know, maybe you didn't get them while you were growing up, but what I'm looking for now is how we can step into that place where, you know, you may not be recognized by a cop or anything like that, you know, it's as different, but at least within your community, having set milestones that distinguish you from where you were before. And I don't know if that's really coming out right or if that's really making sense and if you really hear that, but that's what I'm looking for. Because I think that and it's going to sound like a judgment, but I think that judgments are good sometimes, is there's a lot of spiritual materialism that I find in the burner community and spiritual communities and counterculture communities and all of that. And we're all at different places and we all come from different spaces, and that's fine. And it gets really cliquey and it turns into superficial, spiritual water, basically, surface. And what I'm looking for is to go deeper. And what I'm looking for is for those bigger, heavier boulders in my life and to connect with people who are looking for the same. So I'm hoping that that resonates with some of you, and if it does, then I would love to be in contact with anybody who's
yeah, I think you found your people for sure. Maybe start an email list and yeah, get in contact with her. You know, we're gonna have some kind of mixing, you know, time right now. So now's an opportune time to connect. And you know, that's really at the heart of this whole project. It's not about having discussion events so that we can, you know, kind of intellectually pontificate. It's so that we can really get on the same page as a community, given our diverse experiences, and like launch projects that are going to increase the quality of life and the evolution of consciousness really in our local communities, which obviously does have a ripple effect on the planet and probably beyond. So.
Yeah, and as you're mixing, Jack Marco is going to play some acoustic music, but he sent his friend Brandy.
Right here, in this moment, in this space, in this time, not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow or what's happening in the world and what's going on, but right here, right now, little goddess babies with us, with each other in this beautiful moment. I believe that rites of passage can be as simple as this. You can create it in the moment with your children, with yourselves, with your spouses, with your friends. Hey, I think right now is a good time. Let's have a rites of passage. Let's just have this moment and say we're stepping into this new dimension. We're stepping into this new path, right? Which is what we're all here to do. We're all here to be enlightened and feel a different vibration than what we've been feeling. That old story, those old ways, they're just not working. So tonight you're going to find new ways, you're going to explore new ideas, and you're going to come up with things that you can take into your community and have rites of passage with. There is no right or wrong. As I call in the directions tonight, they are as they were taught to me through Alberto Viola. If you go to Peru, they'll be called in differently. If you're in the Indian nation, it'll be called in differently. If you're at home, it's just a prayer. So as I open up these directions right now, it doesn't resonate with you, say your own prayer, man, because it's all good. It's all right. If we're all living in Aini, which is an Andean word that means reciprocity, which means everything that we do, if we give back, as we take, our land will become one again. We will become one again if we learn how to give back when we take. And all the stories and all the newspapers and all the drama, really do your best just to step aside, jump on the back of an eagle and watch it go. So right now I just invite you to drop in and connect however you connect. I like to connect to the crystalline grid below us. Imagine the beautiful crystalline grid below us and dropping into that crystalline grid below us and shooting that beautiful, wondrous light right up through us and connecting to the crystalline grid and the star nations above us. And as we connect on this planetary level, and we feel that planetary vibration and all the love that's happening right now, not all the fear, feel the vibration of the love. You're going to open the directions. You can just stay where you are. The winds of the south, Sachi Mama, great serpent, be with us. Be in our medicine space. Wrap your coils of light around us tonight. Help us to release our old stories, shed our old skin, the way you shed yours so gracefully, and teach us to walk a path of beauty, enlightenment, and Aini, hope. The winds of the west, Otarango, Jaguar, Puma, protect our medicine space now. Be with us. Take us across the rainbow bridge with no enemies on either side. Teach us how to mulch what no longer serves us, spitting it deep into the earth's magma, transforming it new. Hope. To the winds of the north, Siwakinte, royal hummingbird, ancient ones, grandmothers, grandfathers, come be with us. Take us on a mythic journey. Teach us to drink nectar from only the sweetest flowers. We come in deep honor and reverence. Hope. To the winds of the east, eagle, condor, swoop down and feed on what no longer serves us. Teach us to jump on your back, fly high in the sky, and see things from a different perspective. 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 However you want us to see it. Let us see it. Help us to change our views. Hope. Pachamama, Mother Earth, Mother Gaia. Creepy crawlers, two-legged, four-legged. Plant people, rock people, stone people. Wing-furred, finned and fairies, be with us now. Hold us sweetly. Teach us to walk softly upon the planet. Grandfather Sky, Grandmother Moon, Inti Tai Tai, Mama Kia, Star Sisters, Star Brothers, Transcendent Masters and Angels, be with us now. Be in our medicine space. Be with us for transformational healing for ourselves and our grandchildren's grandchildren. Hope.
Thank you. Now, if we may all actually follow the man with the laptop into the other space, we're going to kind of open up the discussion a little bit now that we've had a little bit of hard time, a little bit of time to really basically with the rites of passage, you know, the progression is usually one of separation, initiation, and integration. So at this point, you know, we've kind of set ourselves off and separated ourselves from even just the few people that are in the coffee house working on different things, and we're taking this time out to like kind of bond as community and to have this discussion. So now we've had the opportunity though to kind of get on that level and get into the heart space. We're going to move into maybe a bit more of a cerebral space as we go back into the main discussion area. We will return to this sacred space later though, I promise you that. So we shall venture back out.
And taking that sacred space with you, you know what I mean? And learning how to incorporate the sacred space so that it stays with us all throughout our day. Right? So we're just taking it with us and spreading the love.